Hello and welcome to Pinzone and my first upload for 2022. In this episode I'm going to change out one of the front CV shafts. The boot on the gearbox side, on the passenger side, has split, and I discovered it probably a little bit later than it first happened, and it's probably been contaminated, and I don't want to just put a new boot and maybe risk some other issues with dirt and grime wearing out parts. So I picked up a aftermarket CV shaft, so it's not a genuine Subaru part, but I'm hoping that it will have some good longevity and keep me going for many miles, kilometres, wherever you may be. Australia with kilometres. But let's get on with it and change a CV shaft out. I've had this jack for about 40 years, and I keep saying to myself, I'm going to upgrade and get a different floor jack, low profile, heavy lift. What's this do? Mind you, this is 1800 kilos, so it's got the capacity, but sometimes it seems to not give enough lift, but I'll see what I can manage. That's pretty much it at its full lift. I've lifted the car up, got it on stands, and I've gone under the vehicle just to have a look, and on further investigation I've discovered both sides are split. In this case I'm going to continue with the driver's side and replace that shaft with complete new boots, etc. And then I'll follow up on the passenger side probably in the next week or so with another shaft. So by the end of the day I would have done both. I'm using a 19mm impact driver on a cordless impact gun. It's a good opportunity to check your disc pads while you're at it. This is the nut that holds the CV shaft in place on the hub. There's a little indent there that's just pinned over to stop the nut undoing once it's tightened and in place. I'm just going to use a punch to try and lift it up a bit so that hopefully it will come off easier. I've got a 32mm 1/2 inch drive socket. It's not an impact driver socket, but it should be satisfactory for this application. I also have to remove some of the bolts that hold the hub and the wheel in place. This bolt here is also the camber adjustment, so I'm going to mark that so I can put it back in place. So I'll put a mark on the flange. I can get this in focus. Just going to put a mark on the flange and also the bracket at the end of the strut, so I can put it all back into the right position. The bottom bolt doesn't have any adjustment, it's just straight through. I'll take off the bolt for the brake hose line. I'll also remove the bracket that holds the ABS sensor or cable. and we'll continue with that process, see how we go. I removed the top nuts from the strap bolts. I removed the bolts holding the ABS line onto the chassis, as well as the bracket onto the strut. I've taken the brake line bracket off the strut. The nut is off the end of the shaft, and I'll possibly have to give that a hit with a hammer to loosen it, but I'm just going to take the bolts out from the strut. Okay, I've got the shaft moving. Okay, I'm swapping to my mobile phone just to show you this section, because bringing the camera under here is a bit more awkward. So that's the end of the CV that goes into the gearbox. In the process of taking the shaft out, it actually separated from the joint, separated from the CV joint, actually pulled out of that cup or that socket. So and then I removed it from the hub. So it pulled out of the hub. There's a seal, you can see a seal, you can see the spline shaft, or the splined socket that the shaft goes into. That's where the CV joint separated, pulled out of that cup. And I've just got to remove that portion that goes into the gearbox off. It's a view of the passenger side, lots of grease sprayed everywhere. The CV joint boot is split. That's the opposite side, passenger side component that goes into the gearbox. So that'll be the next one I do when I've got the parts. I do appear to have a bit of an oil leak under here also, so that's something to investigate. I'll just keep an eye on the oil level, make sure it's all good, not going down too quick. Okay, I've just used a pry bar to separate that CV boot there, or CV cup, away from the gearbox, and it's just leaking a bit of transmission, oh, not transmission, but a bit of gearbox oil. So that just pulls away from there now. If I can get my hand there to remove it, and that'll pull away. Okay, it seems to slow down the leak, but now I've got to crawl under that. This is what's happened in removing the CV shaft. Because the boot was broken all the way through, the CV joint separated from the cup that it sits in, or the rollers separated from the cup, and they've pulled out, and that's why this stayed in the transmission or the gearbox, also because it was snug in there, so that stayed in the gearbox. This part of the shaft pulled out. Now it's a matter of just putting the new one in. As you can see, this is the new shaft next to the old shaft. I've just done a quick comparison and they look to be the same shaft. Of course, one's manufactured by a different company. I'm not sure if the other one that I pulled out is an original, but apart from some cosmetic differences, the clips, the steel bands to hold the boots on, they're slightly different, but we're looking at also the pickup there for the ABS. The shaft's the same. I've got a new nut with the shaft. Trying to compare the lengths as best as possible, even though this one's separated, and all looking good. We've got the C-clip on the end of the shaft, which we need. That just holds it in place, and it's just a matter of putting it all back together now. Just applied a little bit of gearbox oil to the shaft here. I've just cleaned the seal that this fits back into. I've just cleaned the seal a little bit down here. Just make sure there's no grit or dirt before I put it back together. So let's try and reverse the process. Alright, so I've wiggled that into place. I've managed to get the top camber bolt in, the bottom strut bolt in. I've got the 32mm shaft nut just loose at the moment. I'm just going to tighten that before I tighten anything else. Just make sure this top camber bolt stays in place. Okay, I've reinstalled all the bolts. I haven't used the impact driver to put in the smaller bolts. I've just used a ratchet. Okay, so I over tighten them or strip them. I'm just going to peen this over. So that is secure. Just get the nuts started, make sure they're covering a few threads before I use the impact driver. And I'll check those with a a hand spanner, hand wrench later. Okay, let's get this down on the ground. Okay, all finished, back together. I wouldn't call that a fully comprehensive guide to how to change your CV shafts. Of course, when you're trying to film and do the work yourself, you sort of try to do the job and hopefully capture some of the relevant parts. Once you've got all your tools ready and your replacement shaft, it's just a matter of going through a methodical process, and it's not beyond maybe finishing it all in an hour. And of course it's satisfying doing your own work and trying to save some money at the same time, and that way you can also inspect other parts of the car. When I went to change the CV shaft, I noticed the other shaft the boot was worn. Notice there's a little bit of engine oil leaking, so while you're doing one repair you can check your vehicle for other wear and tear. So keeping an eye on your own car is good for safety, good for maybe saving money and safe motoring. So thank you for watching, and see you next episode.